Thanks for getting up at 9:30 on a Sunday after I hear many people had lovely nights. My lovely night involved my teddy bear and an early bedtime. Woo!
Self-care.
Self-care.
So we are recording this, but if we partly because we want to make sure we're getting all the concepts. So sometimes you guys will share something and we're like, oh my God, we should always include this. So it lets us upgrade for the future. And if we think that the record, like it went well, sometimes we post it so other people can to hear it and benefit from it. If you don't want to be recorded, you can just say so before you speak up. Or if the particular topic feels really personal, you can just tell us and we'll shut off the camera for that period of it, so that we want people to be able to share freely. But we also would love for people that can't be here to be able to access this, because we think it's so important for our community.
Yeah. In terms of who we are, do quick intros, and then we'll talk about guidelines for the room. I'm Dr. Liz. I'm a psychologist and coach. I live in San Francisco. I work with people on sex and relationships. This is a topic that is very personally interesting to me from a lot of different angles, and we'll talk about some of those angles when we do kind of our story around this.
Yeah. I would love to, can we just go around the room and I'd love to hear, like, if you want to share your first name, your pronouns, and what you hope to get out of this class, because this is, we want to gear it towards what you're most interested in. This is a very big subject.
Right.
My name is Kat, she, her, and shame and perfectionism are basically just like my main big issues in every aspect of my life. And particularly non-monogamy has come up so much for me, so it's something that I'm always working with. So anything I can get on it is great.
Welcome.
I'm Melody. I use she, her. I run 2 alternative relationships groups in Seattle, and I'm looking to figure out somewhere an in-between between ostracization and restorative justice, because I don't have the wherewithal to provide restorative justice.
Sure.
And I don't feel like ostracization is necessarily the answer either.
Yes. We're sitting at these 3 tables
so
if possible.
I'm trying to figure out how to handle all that as we have, lots of things come up.
Wonderful.
Great oxytocin, by the way.
I'm sorry?
Great oxytocin.
Thank you.
I'm Jay. Pretty much what you said about like just shame and perfectionism are just the things in my life all the time, and so always try to find ways to combat them.
Yeah, and I see echoes of what is in my own life in the community all the time. So welcome. Thanks for sharing. Let me get settled.
So if you feel like sharing, we're sharing names, pronouns, and what it is we'd like to get out of the class.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jeremy, and I guess heterosexual male pronoun is fine.
All right. Do you have anything particular you want to get out of the class, or you can pass? Nobody has to share if they don't want to.
Oh, I just got here, so.
Yeah, no problem.
Cool.
It's the one I picked.
Yeah.
All right.
Welcome.
Thanks.
My name's Laura, she and her, right? And I'm more curious about the implication of sex health in communities relatively to this whole realm.
Wonderful. Welcome.
I'm Sikun, also she, her, and I'm with Laura. Like for me, it's a new step in all that relationships and being positive about these things. And I just want to hear new thoughts, new ways. I'm a perfectionist, but I'm also like, I don't want to be like too perfectionist. So yeah, I'm just curious.
Wonderful. Welcome.
I'm Wendy, and I'm helping run this conference. And even in running, like setting the speakers up for this conference, we ran into some things where it was a lot more nuanced as far as like respecting our community and people in it that maybe would not be welcome here for whatever reasons. And I'm just wondering, what like Melody said about ostracization as opposed to radical self. This is a new term for me. Radical self what?
No, it was a radical
Restorative justice.
Restorative justice, yeah.
We'll talk about restorative and transformative models and how they're similar and different.
That's new concept to me, so
Yeah.
please tell me what that is.
Sure.
Welcome. Do we want to, Kel, we're sharing names, pronouns, and what we'd like to get out of the class, if you'd like to.
Well, I'll say my name's Kale and I use she, hers. I'm just going to pass it to
Yeah.
Perfect.
Excellent. Thank you.
My name's Shannon, and she, her, and
topic attracted me. I love the community, been a part of it for a few years, like caregiving lifestyle community and donor community, and we're very positive, sex positive, saturated and stuff like that, but we do interact with people that are new into the community and trying to teach and learn, and then also I struggle with my own perceptions and beliefs of myself and how I fit in. So my head and my heart sometimes aren't on the same page.
You're welcome. Yeah.
I'm Marigold. I'm grade down. I'm with the local Sisters of the Perpetual Indulgence. The thing is to, promulgate joy and expiate stigmatic guilt, and it's an ongoing learning.
Yeah.
So,
Welcome.
what it will help.
I'm Cheryl, she, her. I guess this is something that I've sort of dealt with throughout my life, and also maybe it's important to me because I work as a nanny with a 7-year-old to the 8-year-old girl, and I would like to sort of help her build the foundation that I didn't get growing up.
Yeah. Welcome. Thank you.
So in terms of guidelines, for this in particular, we're going to be taking we're talking about very difficult subjects. The kinds of things that we're talking about in this panel and that we're all going to be discussing in this panel, because they are complex and nuanced, will often not fit into like 144 characters for Twitter. And so as we're thinking about this class and thinking about how we share about this class, it's important that we keep, as participants, that you don't talk about other people's stuff outside of this class. That we agree to keeping the things that are said in here confidential for the participants. Now, we as presenters,
You can talk about us.
you can talk about us. And I would ask for your consideration in the way that you talk about the things that are covered in here. Because we are talking about things that are so gray often, that are not clearly black and white, it is very easy for things to be misconstrued, particularly the more compact you try to make it. And so as you're sharing things, just be aware of how the things we share are going to be perceived by others and how they may take the things that we say about each other.
Yeah. This topic is really difficult for a lot of people because we care so much. If we didn't care, it wouldn't be hard. For a long time, victims didn't have a voice. They were blamed. Our society did not hear them. So there's been a lot of emphasis on making sure people are heard. And I think our community really cares about using the right pronouns and doing it right to try to include everybody. And when we put a lot of work into something and feel like we're doing it right, and someone doesn't, there can be some judgment. And we have a lot of people coming into the community, and I've done it myself. I try to catch myself, like kind of shaming someone. Well, you should always ask pronouns. This person had never heard about that. It wasn't there wasn't anything wrong. It was just a lack of education. But I think that we were brought up in our society so much that shame was the appropriate way to control people. That if we shame them, they will start behaving, rather than inviting them forward and educating. And that's what I want. And I think if we can look for ways to invite people forward and notice that not everybody has our understanding and our perspective. I also want to be not afraid when I try new things. So we'll talk a little bit about we talked about brave space in our pre-con too. Brave space is where you're willing to step outside of your comfort zones and not always just play it safe, but you know how to clean it up. And that's one of the things we want to talk about. That works for our internal self as well as our community. If we always have to feel like we have to be perfect. We're never going to leave that very small comfort zone that feels safe. And then we're bored and frustrated, and when someone else messes up, we're like, I was so careful, I did all this stuff, I sacrificed all these things, how dare you make a mistake? Because we're resentful, not because of what they did, but because of how small we've made our world to try to be so perfect. So I like the idea of a braver space where we all have permission to mess up sometimes. I'm gonna mess up. One of my lovers changed pronouns, and I messed it up for a year and a half. And thank God they were very forgiving. But it was like, wow, I can't believe it, I did that again. If I could, the only other option was to never use a pronoun around them. And that was small. Like, I want to be able to relate to people and connect to people. And that's gonna be messy sometimes. And we're going to make mistakes sometimes and step on people sometimes. And I grew up thinking I had to be perfect to be minimally acceptable. That was how I was raised. If I ever made a mistake, I had to apologize or try to hide it. And that's not how I want to live my life. And I don't want that to be my community either, because that means that we're hiding things, which is the very thing that creates shame and toxic relationships.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of Brene Brown. Is everyone familiar with Brene Brown's work? So Brene Brown says unequivocally from her research that you cannot shame someone into changing their behavior. Shame is ineffective as a behavior change tool. And when we turn to perfectionism, often what we're trying to do is hide our shame or avoid shame. We think if I can just be good enough, if I can just do everything right, then I'll never have to feel shame again. I'll never have to feel that pain. If I can just be inhumanly perfect, I can avoid it. And none of us can. And we are all, over a long enough timeline, going to fuck up, and fuck up big. The worlds that we play in, we are all playing with fire. Every one of us. We are doing things that have much higher risk levels and that can impact people in much more deep ways and profound ways.
Good and bad.
Good and bad, than folks who stay in the non-magical world. And that means that we have to find a way back for people who make mistakes, for people who fuck up, for people who are learning. Because if we don't, there's not going to be any community left.
And we're distracted from the things that are really big that we really should be fighting by infighting within the groups and people taking sides and struggles there when there's really big things we should be focusing on.
Yeah.
Do you want to share your story?
Sure. So I was married, and I met my ex-husband through the blues and swing dancing community. Oh, fuck, I'm going to cry. Okay, it's going to be a cry morning. Great. When we met, he was a teacher and organizer. He was a big figure in the scene. I was relatively new to the scene. I was 21 when we met, and he was 31. I was just about to turn 22. And he was this gorgeous man everyone in the scene wanted. And he wanted to date me, of all the people. And it was so exciting and so wonderful, and I felt like I didn't deserve it. And so we got together. We ended up getting married. And we had structured a relationship that was about making sure that he was happy, because I didn't feel like I deserved him. I didn't feel like I deserved to belong there. And over time, as I went through grad school and started becoming more myself and growing and learning, I started asking for things and having my own needs and having my own wants and having boundaries. And that made our relationship more and more and more toxic. And I was miserable. I felt a bleakness and a sorrow that is just undescribable. And we weren't having sex very much at all, and he would make it clear that it's because I had put on some weight, and he didn't really think that I was as attractive anymore. And I felt like I was starving. I felt like I couldn't breathe because I was so hungry for attention and affection. Touch is my first love language, and not getting touch is so hard for me. And so one night I was at a party that my ex-husband was supposed to be at with me, and he came late and left early, and I'd been drinking. I didn't have a good way to get home. We lived in an area that I didn't feel comfortable walking home from the party. And there was a man there who thought I was pretty. And it was the first time in a long time that I had felt like someone wanted me. And I had sex with him at that party. And I felt so good in that moment to be seen and wanted and touched and understood. And the next morning, I felt like the worst person in the world. And I told my husband what I'd done, and he told me what a terrible person I was. And we went to therapy, and things got a little bit better for a while, sort of, except that it was clear we were in therapy to fix me. Clearly, I was the problem. Obviously, it was me. There was nothing he needed to do or fix, because he wasn't the one who fucked up. And 9 months later, things were back to exactly how they were, and I was ready to be done. I wanted to leave. And I was gonna tell him, I had decided, and he came home, or I came home from school, and I walked in the door and he said, "Oh my God, I'm so glad you're home. I just had the worst nightmare that we broke up and it was over nothing. And I'm so happy to see you." And I was like, oh my God, fuck. So I couldn't tell him. I couldn't say that after he said that to me. Because the moments that I got from him where he actually appreciated me were so rare. And so instead I cheated on him again. And told him. And then he posted a public blog and a public note on Facebook and a post on MySpace, which was still a thing, talking about what a cheating whore his wife was. And with his theories of everyone I'd had sex with, and telling everyone that we knew that they had to choose sides. And that if they said they weren't choosing sides, he would know which side they'd chosen. I lost almost all of my friends in my community, and I'm still banned from some dance events because of this. There are still people I meet who, when they find out who I am, they say, "Oh my God, you're that Liz, but you're nice." And that was 8.5 years ago. 8.5 years ago that this happened. And I still, when I see him, feel like I have to get the fuck away and run. And so for me, this panel is really personal. Because yes, I fucked up. I should not have cheated on my husband. That was not the right decision. But I did not deserve to lose all of my friends and my community and the things that I loved. And I wish that there had been a way for that community to come to me and talk to me about a way back. And talk to me about a way that we could find some kind of common ground so that I didn't have to be kicked out forever.
Thank you. Everybody take a nice deep breath. I think that's partly the way that we know how to handle things in our community, is if something's causing enough toxicity, we kick one of the people out, and we have to choose which one. And that's very hard, and it splits the community, it divides our power. And it's not fair often. People were hearing one side of the story in this case, where there was a very complex two sides of it, and often that's things on social media, it's very easy to get that 144 character side of it. And there certainly are times when it's very black and white, and we have to say, no, you cannot be part of our community anymore. I think that is still an option that we have to consider. At times when someone's being repeatedly toxic, and I've done that with my community in Dallas when I was there. One person, after 6 months of continual work, he just could not understand no. And we were like, I'm sorry, you cannot come back. If you'd like to talk to us in 6 months and tell us what's changed, we'll consider it. And you'd have to have a chaperone the whole time. But we had to. It was taking too much from the community. But I think in 95% of the cases, this is a rough guess off of my head, top of my head, it's much more black and white than this. And I really appreciate you sharing so vulnerably, because we don't always hear the suffering on the side of both. Like we know the person that we're talking to or the person that we're following. And it's really easy when we're frustrated and angry to paint the other person as bad. And my agenda for being here is actually, my dad abused me for a long time when I was a kid. He sexually abused me. And I want people, I want people to be safe. I want victims to not be re-traumatized or re-victimized. I want to create a space where people can come and heal from shame. But I also firmly believe that my dad didn't necessarily belong in a community like this, but there had to be a path back for redemption. because the first time he touched me, if he went to a therapist or anyone for help, he was going to be put in jail. And some people do belong in jail for what they do. I honestly think he was struggling so hard. He was poly in a world that was monogamous. He was very sexual in a world where my mother didn't like sex. There were a lot of confusing things going on. And I must stand that there's redemption for everyone. It may be a long journey, and it does not mean we have to include them in our community all the time, but I want everyone to have a path back, a way to redeem themselves and not be thrown away. Because my dad was an amazing, powerful person, and he so wanted to figure it out, and he did not know how. And this information would have been so powerful for him. Oh, I can love more people than one and not feel ashamed. I can want to have sex with more than one person and not be a bad person. Oh my God. And that's one reason I care so much about this community, because I think there's so many people struggling, and they're in boxes, and they're fighting their way out, and they're hurting each other because they don't fit in the boxes. So if we can find ways to let ourselves make mistakes and come back, and other people make mistakes, even really horrendous ones sometimes. Again, not saying we have to let them in our bedroom or our community all the time, but I really think there has to be a way to redemption, or we throw people away, and nobody deserves to be thrown away.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, no, it's great, thank you.
So this is obviously a super personal topic for us. And some things that I think we want to talk about are, how do we find balanced approaches here? I think Kathy made a really good point at the start, that in culture at large, there is still a shit ton of rape culture that blames victims, that gaslights people who are abused, that negates the reality of people who are experiencing difficult things, that does not believe victims. And I think our communities, in the interest of being different and not perpetuating that, have swung over here, where the second someone says they are a victim, the second someone reports any experiences of abuse or problems or consent violations, we 100% believe them. And we stop asking questions. And I think that in both situations, we're not finding the way to greatest nuance and greatest truth and greatest understanding. I'll tell a story about something I've done. I was visiting a lover out of town, and I went out with one of my friends to the bars one night, and that lover did not come with me. And we had a lot to drink that night. We met up with this bachelor party I'd met on the plane flying in, and those boys were so happy to buy us drinks. And I went back to my lover's house, crawled into bed with him, and I don't really remember much after that. The next day, he told me that we had had sex that night and that he had not wanted to. That I had had sex with him when he had not wanted to have sex with me. I felt terrible. And we spent about an hour and a half talking about that, talking about what he needed, talking about how he was feeling and what he wanted from me, and what I could do to help him feel more safe, and what I could do to make amends and to find my way back. And I feel immensely lucky that his approach was to tell me that it had happened and give me a way back. And we're still friends, we're still lovers, and we still have a connection. And I am so aware that if the next day he had posted on Facebook about what happened, I would not be here today. So what do we do? When this happens, how do we talk about it? How do we find the space of understanding for everyone involved? So models that people have brought up: restorative justice, transformative justice. Does anyone have good descriptions of those that they feel like giving? Do you want us to give descriptions? Okay, so zooming way out, the approach to criminal justice that our societies participate in is called the carceral approach. If you read Michel Foucault's Crime and Punishment, which is an excellent book, in the beginning, our thought of crime was that crime was a behaviorally based thing. So you would cut off someone's hand who had stolen something because the hand was at fault. And once you cut off the hand, they were fine. They were back into society. They were reintegrated. They had paid their price. When we moved to a morality-based version of crime and punishment, we began putting people into prisons to reform their souls. The issue was no longer that their hand had committed a crime. The issue was that they were problematic, and we had to fix them as a person. That's why we started putting people in these places where we just hold them for a while with the hope that it will reform their soul, they will come out new people. The intent of this program is to punish as a means to create fear of perpetration in others and as a way to reform those who have participated in crime. The drawback of this approach is that it is a binaristic system. There is a victim and there is an aggressor. There is someone who commits the crime. There is someone who was harmed by the crime. The person is either guilty or innocent. There is no gray area in between. They are either found guilty of the crime or they are found not guilty. What can happen is because we are all grown in a carceral mindset, when something like a consent violation happens, we take a carceral approach. It either happened or it didn't. This person either gets to stay or they don't. We either trust the victim or we don't.
Yeah, they're telling the truth or they're not.
It is an either-or system, okay? Restorative justice moves past a carceral approach and says that incorporating people into the prison system, particularly black and brown people who are already or overrepresented in those systems, indigenous people or native people who are already overrepresented in those systems, does not actually change or help anything. And so instead what you do is you center the victim's needs and find a way to restore the community to where it was before the incident happened. So the idea is that we are a community. The crime happens in community. We must heal as community. Restorative approaches, again, center the victim's needs and wants and will involve participation of the perpetrator or the accused perpetrator. They will also involve community members who are leaders in the community and who each of those parties feel like they can rely on to help them through that process. It is often a series of meetings. There will be agreements coming out of it in terms of how things will happen going forward. And it is considered a very victim-centered approach. Transformative justice looks one level further out to say not just how did this person commit this problem, but how did we as a community create the situation in which this problem would arise? So they look to the specific incident that has come up, and they work with the victim and the perpetrator as desired on both of their parts, and also look at what can we as a community do differently and better in the future to help prevent these things from happening again. There's some really good articles online comparing restorative and transformative approaches. The thing about restorative and transformative approaches is that they are far more labor and time intensive than a carceral approach. It is very easy to say, we're kicking you out, we're not kicking you out, end of process. It is much more challenging to find 5 to 10 people who are going to come together to hold these people in this process and process this together as a community to come up with community-level solutions, implement those over the long term, and continue to check in around them. It is hard.
And I think it's also, if we think about it, is it okay if I use you as an example? We were talking about ice cream the other day, and say you and Wendy went for ice cream and you stole Wendy's ice cream, and we kick you out because of that. That's there's all of a sudden there's a void in the community. We lost your voice, we lost your power, and people might be picking sides and, oh, that wasn't fair, she was mostly done with it, or there's all this, people are tweeting about it.
Wendy doesn't really need ice cream.
Yeah, she wasn't a good person to me that day. She didn't
How do
deserve
we know
it.
they weren't doing a scene that involved Laura stealing ice cream from Wendy?
But now there's also a fear for the rest of the community. Oh, wow, I stole a bite of Liz's ice cream the other day. Does that mean I'm going to get kicked out? I can never speak of it. Oh, I finished the ice cream. Was it really mine? There's all of a sudden a whole area where there's like fear around it. And in the community, like I can't speak of it. Therefore, it's a hidden part of myself, something I have to keep out of the community. And I want us to be able to bring all of us to community. And that's where we heal. And if we're authentic and powerful, that's where we heal. So restorative would be that you have to buy Wendy ice cream, and we all talk about it. The transformative would be education about how we really shouldn't steal ice cream. And maybe signs in the ice cream store.
Or we could look at, did Laura steal Wendy's ice cream because Laura was starving?
Yeah.
Did Laura
Look at
steal
the
Wendy's
deeper
ice cream
picture.
because last time Wendy stole her ice cream?
Yeah.
There are a lot of situations that come up that are dual perpetrator. And the way our community currently functions, we preference the person who comes forward first. And if there are dual perpetration scenarios, I was a psychologist in the Army for a long time. I would say almost half of the male service members I saw accused of domestic violence, their partners had hit them first. Their partners had hit them more often. Their partners had been emotionally abusing them. And they were the ones who spent a night in jail, not the partner. These things are not simple. They are not binaristic. There is one aggressor, there is one receiver. Right? So when we look from restorative and transformative models, we're looking at the greater degrees of things that can happen.
And I think it's worth the effort because I don't want to be ashamed or hiding things. I want to be able to say, hey, I messed this thing up. I'd love help. I'd love my community to help me figure out how to do this better. And that's part of what this is we would like to, we want everyone to be able to share ideas because it's not a simple way. How do we create a community where people can come and talk to each other, where we don't have wars on social media, that we're kind of blasting each other and taking sides? How do we encourage people to go, oh, I'm going to go talk to Wendy and I'm going to talk to Laura and hear what exactly happened and get to know their lives more rather than just, I was grumpy at Laura yesterday because she went for ice cream without me, so I'm going to side with Wendy, or more legitimately, if I was more friends with one of them than the other. It pulls our community apart, and we can't afford that right now.
The other thing I see sometimes is that when someone has been accused of something, because we often have these ingrained carceral attitudes, we stop respecting that other person's agency and boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Why didn't Wendy defend her ice cream?
Right. So for instance, if Laura stole Wendy's ice cream, we would now say, well, Laura, what's wrong with you? You need to apologize to Wendy. And if Laura, for whatever reason, can't do that immediately, we start saying, why haven't you apologized to Wendy yet? You need to apologize to Wendy. Every day that goes by that you're not apologizing to Wendy is a bigger deal. And maybe Laura was too emotionally overwhelmed to do it. Maybe Laura had a death in the family. We don't know, right? Maybe Laura was having too many strong emotional reactions to be able to actually fully engage. And then if Laura says, look, y'all, I need a couple of days, it can be viewed as them not participating in the process, not being willing to take accountability, not doing things the way that we wish that they would. There's this sense in which once someone has been accused of a problematic behavior, we negate their humanity. They become defined by that behavior and are no longer allowed the ability to say, I can't do this right now, or I need some space, or this way that this is happening isn't working for me right now. And I get where that comes from. Again, many of us have histories of trauma. And when we are reacting to these situations, we are reacting the way that we wish others had reacted for us when we were hurt. I think the fault is that we don't think about the ways in which we have been problematic and how we would wish people would react to us when we are the ones who did the problem.
Absolutely. So I'd love to hear sharing from people. How would you offer support without adding to drama? Because that's part of the thing. It's really exciting to be part of a big dramatic thing, to feel like we can really black and white is so easy. I can get behind that. I can put my energy there, and that person's really bad and that person's really good. There's kind of that adrenaline rush going on. How can we remind ourselves? How can we offer support to people without adding to that drama? Does anyone want to share thoughts they have on that?
You could talk to them and focus more on specific
Yeah,
Do it privately instead of publicly.
yeah, definitely.
I think that deep breath that we all did after your speech, do that before you hit post on your social media. Like, does this actually need to be out there, or am I just like processing and unpacking my own emotions?
Yeah.
Am I contributing by sharing this?
And if it's a big deal, maybe wait an hour before you hit post.
Yeah, sleep on it.
Yeah,
Sleep on it,
exactly.
hit send in the morning.
Yeah,
Or reacting to a post that somebody else shouldn't have posted. That one is hard. You
yeah,
just want to like, what are you doing? And then you phone, like, this actually just happened recently in the Burning community, Burning Man community, and it was like, oh, I thought this is the way it was going to be, and then there was like a response that was like, no, I don't, like, anyways, and then my girlfriend stepped up and said, actually, this is what we agreed as a group, and then, you know, like, now it's going back and forth, and we both assumed, you know, we gave it a couple of opportunities for learning, and then we both stepped back, and
yeah.
I text her, I'm like, so, how are you feeling about this? And she's like, I wrote a draft, I waited 10 minutes, I deleted it. And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm stepping back too. So, but it's really hard, like, and then of course other people start joining, and days go by where I'm like, oh my God, when did I start? and you know, and it's over something as stupid as, I just want someone to stay in my trailer, but we just can't do it right now because we're waiting 2 weeks.
A lot of times,
You know, like it's
yeah.
something simple, and,
Yeah.
and it's just like, I don't know. And when it's a big thing, it just creates scars and tears in the community, and just like, I'm packing up and leaving this group now, and like.
Yeah, people sometimes leave because it's not worth the
Yeah,
energy.
it's not worth the hassle. I don't want to be involved in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really like a shame. And like I said, that was something super simple.
And sometimes our response isn't even about like you said, it's not about the thing. It's like, I had a frustrating day, I need to vent, and this seems like a good place to vent. Like, I'm gonna just let my anger out here.
Or sometimes it's something has triggered our own stuff,
Yeah,
right? I'm reading about something that's sort of similar to my situation, and that's triggering me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like using the nonviolent communication stuff and just like, I hear you, and well, it sounds like you're feeling this, and reflecting back a lot, and finding out what are they needing, because what a victim needs sometimes is just to be heard and know that people like, do they want the person ostracized? What do they see, but
yeah. Sometimes I've seen.
Figure out what their need is at that time.
There's been lots of incidents where the person who was victimized didn't want the level of response either. They're like, whoa, like, I never asked for this person to be kicked out. I just wanted something, like, sometimes the community will, or groups will take it and run with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, asking them what they actually want. Like, how would you like to be made up to, like, how would you like to be apologized to for having your ice cream stolen?
Yeah. One of my favorite questions to ask people when they're talking about hard things is, how can I best support you right now? Right? Because I don't know what that is. Maybe what they need is to vent. Like if I say, I don't know, I'll offer options. Do you need to vent? Do you need me to be your cheerleader? Do you want me to talk about what a shitty person they are? Do you need me to help you get in contact with other resources? What do you need from me? Let me know. What is it? I'm here for you. Do you need to be left alone? Do you need someone? I've had some friends go through some really shitty public breakups, and I've been the person who filtered their email for them or filtered their Facebook. I really wish I'd had someone to filter my email when one of my ex-husband's friends sent me an email talking about what a piece of garbage I am. You know?
Yeah.
Sometimes when there's a victim who comes to you and needs help, obviously you can be avoidant, but I often find myself feeling avoidant about those issues in general in the community. But as a person who's put on this conference and now can't help but think there's some sort of responsibility within me to do something about that or help that people do something about that. So I'm just learning to, instead of being like, no, that's not happening, to be like, okay, how? How do I help? How do I don't want to take sides ever, because I think there's two sides to every story, and I really, really like the idea of transformative justice, when we
Yeah.
come together to be like, how can we keep this person
Yeah, and I think sometimes when there's agreed upon, like we're talking about this now, it's really powerful that it starts creating community consensus. I think when there's a clear, like most people agree that this is a good way to go forward, it's easier to do it. We have a list of skills and steps that most people agree would be a good thing to do. It's not so scary.
I think too, like if, I'm just thinking of Wendy and I working on this conference together, if something came up that I didn't feel I had the emotional bandwidth to deal with, it was really busy that day, or this just triggered something in me, then I could be like, hey Wendy, can you deal with this?
Yeah,
So you don't always have to be, even if someone comes to you, that doesn't mean now you're the appointed person to deal with it.
yeah,
And I think it's always okay to say, if you're the person someone is coming to, like, wow, this is really hard, this is a lot, I care about you, I want to support you the best I can, and I don't know if I am the best person to carry out this entire process for you.
or I don't have the bandwidth to deal with
Right.
it right now.
Here are the things that I have available for you right now, and I can help you find someone else who would be available for these other things. Do you all know who are some good mediators in your area? Sex-positive mediators. You should. It's worth looking into. I know of
Are you meaning professional?
professionals,
Yeah.
people who are professionals. I know of one individual and 2 groups who do mediation in my general area. Who do mediation, who are formal mediators, who have group processes that are oriented towards these kind of collaborative methods. And I worked hard to find them, to make sure that I had those available once I had my own shit coming up. Know who your mediators are. If you don't have any in your community, see if there are folks who are in your community who are willing to do the training to take on these mediator type roles. Yeah.
That's really key. In my community, I'm kind of it.
Yeah.
And so I get called into all sorts of things, many of which I see as a shitstorm in the making, don't want to be part of. Walked away from leadership in a lot of different areas because of that. And a thing came up recently where there was this person accusing that person, both of them very high up in the community, so that makes it even messier and scarier.
Yep.
And I wished, we're doing all this email back and forth, and they're trying to pull me in to sign my name to things. And I really wish they'd all taken some sort of training, all of these leaders, to know how to deal with this non-emotionally, coming at it from a really ethical point of view of balance. And I think that's something that maybe we should think about as a community, offering that kind of training.
Yeah. There are some great resources. One of the resources we're going to give you, actually, just pass out handouts now. I'm put it on the ground.
Do we want to pass out the email sign-up list?
Email sign-up list as well. So one of the resources on this handout you're getting is the Rashomon model of consent violation response. And the Rashomon model was designed for a rope event, and it looks at how do you handle consent violations in a way that is community-based and that does not involve the police unless it's absolutely necessary. Well, not necessary, but unless that's really what the victim wants. And they have a 2-hour training online for free that everyone can do. The other resources on there look at different aspects of restorative and transformative justice. One of them is like a 350-page manual on options in responding to community problems. If you are a leader in your community, which if you're sitting in this room, I can damn near guarantee you are. Because the people who do more education, who inform themselves more, are leaders, whether they want to be or not. It is worth your 2 hours to do that minimal level of training. Something I like about the Rashomon model is that one of their first guiding principles is we trust everyone's intent until we know we can't. Right, so I like the nuance here. In general, a lot of things that happen are unintentional. They're the result of misagreements. They're the result of poor communication. They're the result of people thinking that they know what's happening when they don't. I know that in my past, because I came from a family with a lot of emotional abuse, I would go into compliance. I would not say no when I needed to because I didn't think that my no really mattered and because I didn't think that it was worth the upset and the hassle it would cause. It would just be so dramatic if I used my no. I might as well just get through this. In particular, as someone who is socialized as a woman in a culture where sexual assault is common, there have been sexual situations I've been in where I haven't used my no because I was like, well, if I say no, are they going to hit me? Is this going to become something I can't get away from? We're both intoxicated. Would anyone believe me if they kept on going if I said no? So there are times where I have not said no. So I don't know if it's technically sexual assault, but I certainly was not a yes. And I think that a lot of people go into compliance and then afterwards, rightfully so, feel very upset about what happened. From the flip side, it can be really tough to tell the difference between compliance and good consent. I've worked with a lot of sexual assault survivors, and a lot of them in compliance in the middle of a rape have been positioned on top of the person they were having sex with. In one case that I worked with, that was used in the legal system to prove that they were not actually raped. They were not really consenting. And the argument is that it makes it murky. Compliance makes consent much more complex.
Well, that's one reason, like cuddle parties and what we taught at the play party is like ask for and get a verbal yes. That doesn't mean someone might not be compliant because there are people like I have been in the past. If someone asked me and I felt like they really wanted it, I might have said yes. But it at least gives you, I mean, it's going to filter more of that where it's not about being perfect. And just we're talking about how we can offer support without adding drama. One of the things I've been trying to do for myself is either talk to the person the people involved directly, if I feel that's a good thing that's going to add to it, or say, I don't know enough, I'm going to step back unless I'm asked to be part of this. I don't want to add in to it unless I know enough. And I've actually talked to the people that were actually, the nucleus of the problem. And so that's, just a lot of times I'll talk to Liz, and then Liz will talk to someone else, and then it's a game of telephone. It's like we don't know what we're responding to. Is it actually what happened, or what the person wanted to have happen?
And that's, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask if that's sort of like the whole calling out versus calling in and like bringing people into a conversation as opposed to just like the
You're bad. You did a bad thing.
And I think what I would say is that we talk about ourselves as the sex positive community, but we are not really a community when you look at the definition of what a community is, right? The people who I am in community with are people who I know something personal about, people who I see somewhat regularly. I probably have their phone numbers. I would feel comfortable reaching out to them to ask about an event, right? That is certainly not everyone who's in the sex positive world. We are a series of small communities. But because we speak of ourselves as one community, it can feel like the accountability that people have is to all of the people rather than just the people who are actually around them and in their discrete community.
We have a common intention, but it doesn't, and I'd love to see it be more and more of a solid community where we can reach out more and more and we have agreements. Like I said, being in this room, we're talking about it together, it starts creating that, and that's powerful.
I don't know, so I may disagree with you here.
Okay.
I actually think that I would prefer if we looked at the ways in which we are distinct communities, because I think that in some ways that would be helpful to us in distinguishing who is really a part of our community. If I'm looking to people for community support for something that comes up in the people that I know in San Francisco, I'm probably not going to call someone in Boston to be a part of that community change, right? And I think that for me, I think the acknowledgement of this is this community, this is this community, we have interplay, we have interrelationships, we exchange, we see each other in these places, but we are not necessarily the same community is important to me.
Okay.
That we're a series of communities rather than one single large community?
I think I would like to see both, where we
Yeah.
are aware of our individual communities, we're aware of our nucleus family, and we also have the bigger community where we can source resources and information, and we can all network together to build a common, because we do have a common purpose. So.
I think especially here, there's a geek community and poly community and the lifestyle and the burner community. Kind of all people running in the same circle. Sometimes all of the people are running on the same circle. Some people don't, but it would be good to have some sort of cohesive idea around this.
Very few communities don't Venn diagram with other small
Yeah.
communities.
I would love to see people share the same sort of idea
Yeah.
about this particular topic.
Yeah, I think there's definitely value in knowing our individual communities, but I also like to see an overarching, like, are we talking about these things between communities? Because I don't want communities butting heads either. That doesn't serve us.
Well, it's kind of like the Burning Man community in general. Like we have our burner community, maybe yours. There's the GLC, and there's and that's like people get together. So that's like a commonality. That's what I picture when you say like having both. Right? Like, big one that brings us all together.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like you know everyone.
Right, yeah. It may not be as tight-knit, or I may not have everybody's phone number, but we can still resource and support each other and like share ideas. Like you're sharing about the mediation, I think that's brilliant.
I almost wish there was a different word for it though.
Yeah, we
Because
don't.
when we talk about like who someone is accountable to, they're accountable to the person they've harmed, they're accountable to their community. And if we're using community for both of those things, it expands out so big so quickly. And that's the problem that I see, is that in some stuff that has come up within the last couple of years, people are asking folks to be accountable to community in a way that is unrealistic, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, like if Laura had to make up to everyone at this conference because she took Wendy's ice cream, and maybe it just was sitting there and she just thought it was hers. It doesn't.
If
like,
Laura had to make up to everyone in the Facebook group for sex educators
Yeah.
and all of their individual people because she stole Wendy's ice cream, right? I was expected to be accountable to everyone in the entire swing dancing and blues dancing communities in the world.
yeah.
There's no way.
Yeah, and I find, in Seattle we have so many non-Latinx people in Seattle, like more per capita than anywhere, and so we have lots of different communities and they handle it in very different ways. So we have one group that's fantastic and does restorative justice, they, and we have another that bans people without, they won't even tell you why you're banned. They just ban you, and they, and they'll be they're not very secretive about it. They're supposedly secretive, but it's treated the same. You are banned and not told why if it's a rape and you rape someone, or if you posted on your Facebook that I'm banned from this community, and I posted on my Facebook that my partner at the time cheated on me with someone, and that was outing them. Was that I posted on my personal Facebook. Because, and so, but I would treat it as with the same brush as someone who raped someone. And then people look, when they're like, oh, you're banned from this group.
Yeah.
And there's kind of all the in between. And so, it's not good for us all to necessarily go off what one group is saying, because they also have a tendency to ban, neurodivergent people, that kind of thing. And so it's kind of well, we don't want to necessarily be accountable to one group's how they treat things.
Yeah.
Either.
Yeah, if we have a bigger community we can go to, sometimes that's useful.
You don't necessarily want to follow what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's a really important discussion too. I just 1 second, I want to add to that. What you said, we want the victims, if someone reports a problem, we want them to be able to be anonymous sometimes. I don't want to say that, Wendy may not want to say that she's the one who reported Laura for stealing her ice cream, because she might fear repercussions, or just it might be traumatic for her. But if we ban Laura from the community and we can't even tell her whose ice cream she stole.
Or what it was that she did even sometimes.
Yeah. How do we balance, people get to be, it's a really tough thing. Laura doesn't even get to say, I wasn't even in town that day. It wasn't me, it was a different person. Or it might be that, I didn't know it was her ice cream, I thought it was mine.
And transformative justice does a better job of that, because transformative justice does not require participation of the accuser or the victim. Transformative justice allows you to move forward even if they don't want to be a participant. To bring together people who that person feels supported by, the accused feels supported by, to talk to them about what you have heard, and then come up with a buffet of options. I went to a great presentation at Woodhull last year that Andy I and Ida Mandalay and Tamara Pincus and who was the fourth?
I wasn't there. I didn't go to that one, so I don't
I believe there was a fourth presenter who I'm not recalling, where they talked about transformative and restorative models, and they talked about that there needs to be a buffet of options. In a transformative model, a lot of times what you'll do is you'll ask the accused to help you brainstorm those options so that they have buy-in. You can ask them, like, hey, so we received a report that at a play party recently, you walked up to someone and you touched their butt as they were going down on someone else. And they didn't know that you were approaching and you had not gotten their consent. Tell us about that. Usually they have an emotional reaction. They'll talk about, well, I didn't know that was a problem. I've been to parties before where that's totally fine. I didn't understand that that was an issue. Like, who is it that said this, right? And you'll say, okay, so it sounds like part of it was a lack of understanding. How do we move forward from here? What are the different options? Let's come up with a lot of different ways that we move forward. One of the options could be you never come back. One of the options could be you do some education. One of the options could be that the first few times you come back, you have to have a buddy who helps you out with these things. One of the options could be that you take a few months away from this community, and then after that you come back. One of the options could be you sit down with the person who was affected by you, and you hear what they have to say about it. What are all the different options you can think of? And you let them come up with as many different solutions as possible. And you can do this with the victim as well, with the accuser as well. What are all the different things that you could want from us here? Well, I want you to ban them. Okay, that's one option. What are other options? And accept that the option that you end up finding is best for everyone in the community may not be the most preferred option for the victim or for the perpetrator, and that you're going to have to stand by that.
You had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I'm a facilitator with nonviolent communication groups in town, and we've done lots of work with, as a facilitators group, so we have a group who facilitate and we come together and form our own little community and we interact with them. And we certainly built and stolen processes that we do restorative work and bring the accuser and the person who's, the perpetrator together and have these conversations, and I've been part of it. And so that's certainly a resource that I could connect people to.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, there's a lot of different nonviolent communication, talking about mediators. There's a lot of different resources. I think one of the biggest things is if we just start talking about it, there's not going to be, I don't think that in this community we can have black and white, like this is what we do, if X then Y then Z. It's more like in the situation, what was happening. I was at Woodhull and I saw one of my lovers and I went up and I started, his shaved head, and I was like kind of messing with his head and kissed him on the back of the head. And he turned around and it wasn't my lover. I was like, because they had the same head shape, same body shape, and I was like, oh my God, I was so sorry. We don't always intend, luckily he took it very well, but we don't always intend what we're doing. Like, and do I deserve to be banned at that point for a mistake? If Laura just had an ice cream next to her and ate it thinking it was hers, does she deserve, like, we have to put it in context. And I think we have to have dialogues, but when we know we're very clear about our intention is to find transformation, to find ways to improve our community and help it grow, to find ways to help ourselves feel more safe. And we don't have to be so perfect when we can own what's true. Our community, just like an individual person, can't heal from shame unless we can own what's true, what actually happened. And when we come down on someone very black and white and say, no, you are now bad, and you are not part of our community, that doesn't give any room for that. And there are certain times when we have to say, I'm sorry, your energy is taking more than we can justify. I think, but that has to be a dialogue and something that evolves usually over time, not always, but usually over time.
So in your handout, the first, the action items section, you'll notice is all questions. because I don't think that this is something where we can hand out a sheet of answers. Every situation is going to be so different. And so when you find yourself in one of these complicated situations, ask yourself these questions. Ask yourself before responding. Ask yourself as you continue responding. And at the end of the day, a lot of times, you're going to have to make a decision, whether it's for you personally or for the community at large, and you're going to have to stand by that decision. I have made some decisions about people I'm going to keep in my life versus people I'm not going to keep in my life. And some of those decisions are controversial. There are some people I choose to have in my life who others would tell me I am wrong for keeping in my life. And I've done a lot of thought and a lot of work about making that decision. I haven't made those decisions lightly. And it may mean that I lose friends.
And you may change your mind later.
I may change my mind later. I may lose opportunities. There may be things that are not available to me anymore because of the people that I'm choosing to continue to associate with. And I feel like I'm making the best decision I can, given all of the information that I have. And at some point, you're going to have to make that decision too. And if your decision is not one of those clear, binaristic, black and white decisions, it may cause some stress for you. People may not know how to talk to you about the fact that they don't agree with your decision in a way that doesn't lump you in with the people that they are saying are bad and wrong. And that's tough. And you have to find your space to feel good about that.
Well, I think that anytime we're growing and we're stretching as humans, like when we're little kids, everything's black and white. Santa will bring us the nice things if we're good or whatever it is. But when we're growing as humans, we're getting to be adults, it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncomfortable in ourselves, looking at the things about ourselves. And it's okay for our community to be a little uncomfortable with our decisions sometimes. Humans are not, we don't fit into bins well. And it's okay for us to grow. We want people to be comfortable overall and feel safe, but when we're stretching and growing, there will be discomfort. And I think it's okay, especially if we can talk about it. If we don't make people wrong for making us uncomfortable, it's like, wow, that was a tough discussion, and actually appreciate them for helping us grow when we can, when our tanks are full and we are having a good day.
We're out of time, pretty much, but I'd love to get any last takeaways or any last questions before we formally adjourn.
Can we just go on for the second hour?
That's a lot.
I know.
We could go
this
for the
is
full
such a
morning.
short amount of time to talk about this issue. I am happy to make myself available for these conversations. Probably not today. I'm a little burned out today. But my business cards are at the back of the room.
Mine are as well.
I'm easy to find on the internet. If you want to continue this conversation with me, I am happy to continue this conversation. This is a conversation I think we all need to be having a lot more of. The resources that we gave you on that sheet are just a start. They're the stuff that I was able to find that I found personally helpful. And there may be other resources that call to you more. Some stuff that we don't have on there that I'd love to add. There's a great book, Why Does He Do That? About domestic violence. That's really fantastic. Unfortunately, it falls into a lot of the resources you'll find on domestic violence assume a male perpetrator and a female victim and assume everyone is cis. So you'll run into some of that in a lot of that languaging. But the stuff that they talk about is still good if you can overcome the fact that they are heteronormative and binaristic in their language.
And a real basic, you may have all heard of it, the 5 languages of apology, or when sorry is not enough. Just sometimes when people don't let something go, it's because they haven't felt apologized to in their own language. So Gary Chapman wrote it. He's super religious now. He talks about gay being bad. I apologize. It's the best book I've found for this, for just how people need to hear apologies in different ways. And it's just really powerful sometimes to hit one of those 5 and watch someone go, oh, okay, I'm done now, I'm complete. And if you hadn't hit them, they're like, no. Like you can apologize, some people you can grovel for days, I'm so sorry, and you're like, no, you didn't make restitution, you didn't buy me that ice cream, or whatever it was. So we all have different ways we want to be apologized to, and sometimes that basic thing, making sure we're hitting all 5, the problem may not be there anymore, so.
Yeah, I'm just dealing with one right now in my community where, right now, the last year, because the only thing they wanted as an apology was 1 And so it's today coming back up, like every couple weeks it comes back up. It's like, I can't fix it.
Yeah.
And so, what is the name of that book?
It's the 5 languages of apology.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And for your personal work, Brene Brown's stuff is fantastic
Amazing.
in looking at how you yourself react to shame, how you avoid shame, and how you can build shame resilience. The first in the series to read is The Gifts of Imperfection, and then Daring Greatly, and Rising Strong.
It's so important, I think, a little bit of pre-work before the apology is to really make sure you hear your personality. And that'll mean saying things like, I hear you say, connected to a feeling. I'm hearing that you really want a choice in that matter, really wanting to be seen as an independent human being, whatever, right? So those are kind of connecting to the needs. So dig for those feelings, dig for the needs. When you think you've done that, do a little bit more. Then you get to where you say, well, what would you like to see happen next? So that's where you get to. Do they want to hear the apology? Do they want you to buy an ice cream for them? You know, then it becomes really meaningful and much, much easier. But if you jump to the apology and restitution before doing the hearing piece, you're just, you know,
Often feel cut off.
That's the bottom.
And it may not be about you too. It might be something that reflects from their childhood. That is and when small things keep coming up, it's not always about now. It could be about before.
Have you guys heard of the book Conflict is Not Abuse?
I am just starting to read that. I'm intrigued by what I've read. I think that, so the author even states in the beginning of it that like the book is not intended to be like a Bible of like this is how you do things. It's intended to provoke thought and consideration. Like many things, I think that it has some interesting points that I've read so far. And I think that take all things in moderation, right? Some of the author's points, because I don't know their pronouns, some of the author's points could be similar to tactics used by some people who are abusers or missing stairs to like get away from accountability. And I think that in general it makes a good point that when we feel conflict and discomfort, we often call it abuse or perceive it as abuse.
Really appreciate you guys being here. I know it's a tough discussion Sunday
Yeah,
morning.
thank you so much. Yeah.
But like hopefully, well, it's really important, and I think just being open to the discussion is
Thank you so much.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting us.